I'd like to talk a little bit about our Everything in Place project. The project has been designed to help and encourage us to talk about planning for end of life and future care needs. It's far easier to think about future plans and care needs when we're fit and well. The difficult decision becomes if we have a diagnosis or something changes that makes that conversation much harder. So what this booklet does is encourage you to think about things, wills, power of attorney, funeral plans, and actually encourage you to have conversations with your family so that actually everybody understands what your needs and what your wishes are. The difficult part sometimes is thinking about those wishes, and it's not always easy, but we want to use the document and use the tools to try and encourage you just to open that little bit of your brain that actually would allow you to think about what would be important to you. We know that 95% of the families that fall out at the time of a funeral often happens because the plan wasn't clear, because there was a family fight over where we should be. Do we want cremation? Do we want burial? Families don't know and they're not sure. If you have a clear plan, they might not like your plan, but actually they will know that it's your plan, and we hope that that then allows them to respect your wishes. So we do know that it's much easier to have these conversations while you're fit and well. Most of us have a pretty good idea of what we would want to happen in certain situations, whether it was in a hospital situation, whether it was a care situation, end of life in particular treatment sort of situation, or whether it was our funeral plans. We know what we want. The difficulty is that we don't tell anybody and that we don't want to have these conversations because actually it's too difficult. And that's right, it is too difficult. We know it's too difficult, and we know because it makes people upset, people are superstitious, and people will not, if I write my will, I'll die. We need to get over these taboos and the taboo words, and the taboo words are dead, death, dying. Very, very difficult for conversations. We often hear about passing over, passing away, pushing up the daisies, anything apart from actually the fact that somebody has died. And you know, it's the most natural thing in the world. We're born and we die. Hopefully we have a good innings in between. And what I hear is people saying, what happened? Somebody died. What went wrong? Not necessarily anything went wrong. Sometimes we just get old, we get worn out and die. And unfortunately, sometimes younger people get worn out and die. And we have to accept this and make death a normal part of life. So the project goes out into the community and encourages the conversations, helps us to share the information and plan, as I said, while we're fit and well. The reality and the difficulty comes when we already have a diagnosis, or we're faced with a diagnosis of a life-limiting illness. And actually sometimes I do believe there's an age point where it becomes difficult to think about it just because it's more imminent. So it's really important to have the conversations early. If you do have a diagnosis, if you are feeling vulnerable about the conversations, then I would suggest that you just work through this document, look through the titles and pick the bit that's interesting to you first. Certainly don't read all of it, don't plough your way through it, because it wouldn't help, and that's not what it's designed to do. It's designed to support you and help you. So pick the bit that's important and look at that. Okay. So the booklet was developed on the back of community sessions, and we took the information out, and what we found was that every session that we did, we were asking the same questions over and over again. What does this mean? What does that mean? What happens if? So we came back and we put it all into a document to put everything in one place. Then this document, if it's filled in properly and used properly, will hold all of your information. The first chapter talks about the last taboo, but actually what it's showing is personal information. So it's asking about national insurance number, passport number, and actually we don't really need to know that, but somebody that's registering a death might find that really useful to have that information in hand. The sessions on wills, we talk about 70% of cohabiting couples would not get anything if their partner was to die. There is an assumption that you would. There's an assumption that children, stepchildren and step-grandchildren would be included in a will, and that's not the case. There's an assumption that your debt would die with you. So what we do is we actually just unravel all of this, we pick the bones out of it, and we have very personal conversations about what's important to you. We do a little bit about trusts and putting property into trusts and when that might work and when it might not work. But ultimately in that case it's about getting some sound financial advice. Session on power of attorney. Who would you trust to make the decisions if and when you lost mental capacity? 2 types of forms, one for health and welfare decisions and one for property and financial matters. But actually any of us put our hand up any day, unconscious, car accident, it's not about necessarily death and dying, it's about mental capacity. And the importance of those documents are around who you have the conversations with, and that they actually know in all scenarios what your bottom line would be. If in that situation, where would you want things to stop? And in that sense, it gives medical profession and family members a chance to go, actually, we know we didn't want to progress past this point. It might be you don't want a peg feed, you don't want a new organ, you don't want to be on life support machine. It's your choice. And without putting that document in place, it's very difficult for your family to stand up for your wishes. We look at care, we look at going into care, we look at designing a care home. Again, what's important to you? Do you want somewhere in the country so it's a nice view? Would you want somewhere in a town centre so your friends could come on the bus? Is it most important that you have a glass of wine with your tea? It doesn't matter. Whatever is personal to you is your choice. Make notes, make lists, keep ideas. We encourage you to think about a care home and designing a care home. And then you've got the document, and if the time comes, you've already started to think about it. None of the plans are set in stone, everything can move, but at least the conversations have started. Within that session, we also look at the Decide and Write framework. So we talk about do not resuscitate orders, we talk about advanced decisions to refuse treatment, and we talk when that might be relevant and when it might not be relevant. We talk about organ donation, we talk about donating your body to medical science, we do a little bit about how you store your memories. How would you keep the memories for future generations? Because what we know is when we get to about 50 or 60, there's many questions that we would have liked to ask our parents, and we don't have the information, and we have photographs and we don't know who they are. So it's really important just to be very mindful about all the stuff that you've got going on and actually just keep it in a logical order and a logical format.